Hello everyone. I think we're all up and running. Just checking everything is working all right. Looks like we're good at my end. Please do pop a little message in the chat for me if you wouldn't mind to let me know if you can see me, if you can hear me all right. I think we're good. Just checking the feed my end to make sure that everything is working. I think we're all right. Yes, indeed, everybody's here. Looks a little bit dark today. I don't know, maybe I haven't got the light set up right. Not to worry, because we'll be switching over to the camera on the easel very shortly. All good, everybody says. Can see and hear. Brilliant. I do believe we've fixed the audio issues that I've been having on the last few streams, so we should be fine. Fingers crossed today. We should be all right. Last week worked out fine. Judy says, that's a brilliant comment to start the stream with. Paul, you've pushed me over the edge. I finally bought oil paints last week. Delved back into my first love back in the 70s. Wow, that's very cool. Brilliant, Judy. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. I have nothing against acrylics. I painted with them for a long time. But there's just something about oils. That depth and richness that you can get from oils that you can't really get any other way, I don't think. Okay, so what's happening today? Today is a tutorial type live stream. So I'm particularly talking about what happens to the color yellow when it goes from light to shadow. And in order to demonstrate that, we have a lemon, a beautiful yellow lemon. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what happens to the color and why. This is in specific situations of indoor light, okay? If you're doing a still life, obviously it's different if you're outside in the sunshine. Indoor light, a yellow object, and the lemon is also, it's a very intense yellow. You know, it's not close to grey. It's not a restrained yellow. It's about the highest chroma, which is another word for intensity, yellow, that you will find in an object. So it should be tricky, right? You'll also notice that I've photographed it so a large part of the lemon is in shadow. Now this photograph has been taken with a pretty good camera, a Lumix GH5, and I have carefully I used a white balance and I've carefully color balanced the scene. Obviously it's a photograph, so there is some deviation from life, but a very, very small amount. Believe me, I've been doing this for a long time and I can get photos pretty close to what we see with our unaided visual systems these days. Not the same. It is still a mediated visual impression, mediated through the camera, but it's close, okay? So today I'm going to paint this. I'm going to mostly talk about the colors. I'm going to take you through what the colors actually are on that lemon using ChromaMagic first. Not just so that we can copy those colors, but so that we can understand them. That's the key. And think about why, what's happening to the light and why are they changing the way that they're changing. Then we're going to mix some colors and then we're going to paint. Should be a fun stream today, okay? So firstly, let's switch over to, make sure I've got the right screen up here. ChromaMagic, the incredible ChromaMagic. Will it work? No, why is that? Oh, that was the wrong. Yeah, phew, minor panic attack over. So here is ChromaMagic. Here is my tea, which I'll find time to drink in a second or two. So I just want to show you a couple of things quickly about this color. If you haven't come across this before, this is the ChromaMagic app, written and supplied by the amazing Michelle Clamp, who is an incredible watercolor painter and teacher, also paints in oils and is brilliant at that too. And she has written this piece of software. So down the bottom here, you'll see we've got a load of little kind of color swatches. Now, the thing about all of these color swatches down the bottom, if you haven't come across this before, this is Munsell. They are all the same hue. They're all the same yellow. The only thing that changes is the value from very dark to very light, and the chroma, or the intensity, from close to gray to very high intensity color. So you can, with this app, you can decide like how big a color sample you want to take. Let's make ours a little bit bigger because it's quite a big, high resolution photo. 20 pixels, right? And you can click around and you can see what color it is. Now, if you wanted to, you could use this to try and get incredibly close to the actual colors of the photograph, but I think it's more useful to use this as a learning tool, right? So what does this tell us about the light side of the lemon? This is basically the chroma range that we can get, the intensity range that we can get in yellow paint. It's the highest chroma you can possibly get in yellow paint. Okay, and then you have your half tone, the area between the light and the shadow. That goes down to about a value 6. I'm going to show you how we can translate that directly to the painting in a second. Now in the shadow, this is what we get. Brown, you may say. Okay, and it is brown, but the thing to note about this is that it's gone a little bit more orange, okay, than the light side of the lemon. The light side of the lemon is very yellow, the shadow side is very orange. Not very orange, sorry, it's a little bit more orange. So the hue has changed. Now the only thing that's responsible for it being more yellow or more orange is the hue. Okay, so this is that old kind of cool lights, warm shadows thing that you get in indoor light. Also, the value has gone right down. This is a really low value, but also notice that it's the highest chroma still that we can get in paint at that value. At a value 3, okay, still the highest chroma that we can get. So our job is to try and translate this into paint. You don't have to stick to exactly the colors you see here, but if you keep the properties in mind of the relationships between these colors, it's going to really help you. I mean, obviously you can check some other stuff as well. The background is a value 6, that's nice to know. The cast shadow is like a value 4, that's nice to know. And the cloth, you know, I'm not going to do a lot with the cloth today. Mostly we're going to focus on the lemon, but I'm going to need to paint the background in as well, just so we can see how the colors are working, because one thing about color is that it is all relative. So let's switch over to the easel. This is a 5" by 7" ampersand gesso board panel. Okay. Oh, just realised I haven't got any paint out yet. Let me catch up with the comments quickly and see what everybody's saying. Did that all make sense? Hopefully that all made sense. I know for a lot of you this is stuff that you've seen before, but for some of you hopefully this will be entirely new. Let's get some paint out. I'm not going to need a huge amount of colours. I'm going to explain why I've got the colours that I've got as they go out, right? So lead white, obviously we're going to need, because you tend to use more white than anything else in paintings, and anytime we want to have a high value with a low chroma, white is the best way to get there. I'm going to put out 2 more colours, raw umber. This is Michael Harding raw umber. And when I find it, ivory black. Now these are chroma droppers. That's how I look at them. So I've got something on the orange side to drop chroma and something on the blue side to drop chroma, because ivory black is actually a very low chroma, low value blue. That's how it behaves in mixes. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more very shortly, about how important it is to understand the hues of your colours, and I'm going to do a little bit of mixing on the palette to show you what they are. Let's make the palette full screen actually. I'm always a little bit worried when I do this because 9 times out of 10 I forget to switch back when I start painting, and that's not very useful, is it? Hopefully I'll remember today. This is a very old beat-up tube of transparent red oxide. Now then, why do we want this? Because it's very high chroma. Do you remember the shadow colour we were looking at? It's very intense. This is very intense. At that value, in that hue, it's actually a red-orange. Looks like a brown, I know, but it's a red-orange. That's the highest intensity, highest chroma colour you can get at that value of that hue. This is green gold, which is the same, except obviously it's green, right? But it's a yellow green. So the reason I've got these two out is because they're both about the same value. They're both high chroma, so I can mix between them to get something which is, well, in between them in terms of hue. Because this is too red-orange. I'll show you why in a minute. Or at least I'll demonstrate that for you. This is too yellow-green. What we actually want is somewhere in between. So I'm only going to put 2 more colours out today. I'm going to put out 2 yellows. First one is cad yellow. This is an orange yellow, which is pretty close to the local colour of the lemon. When I say the local colour, I mean that the colour the lemon actually is without any effect of light or shadow. So if I get some of that and I actually put it on the lemon, I'm not planning to use the zest to make lemonade or anything. So that, you can see it's a little bit too light. The value is a little bit too high. And I would say the chroma is probably a little bit too high as well. And it might be a little bit too orange. And in case it's a little bit too orange, I'm also going to put out cadmium yellow lemon. Doesn't matter, you can use that or you can use any other green yellow. So this is kind of like the same as we've got here, but they're closer together, but they're also higher up the value range. They're both high chroma, green yellow and an orange yellow. It's a little bit like, in concept, you might have heard of the split primary palette, where people have, they call a warm and a cool of each colour, right? You see that all right? Yeah, hopefully. Turn that over so we've got a bit more light on the lemon. This is the same lemon, actually. It's not a stunt lemon, it is the original. Yes, Sandra's back. So are we going to have some jokes today? Is Kato here? I haven't seen Kato yet. Hello, Peter. Good to see you. I'm pleased that you've found that useful too. The ChromaMagic app. Yeah, it's cool. Colour deep dive. I do love a good colour deep dive, says Sugar Muffin, which is the most amazing name. And me too. I do love a colour deep dive. Sally says, I have to think backwards because my value chart is 1 is lightest and 10 is darkest. Yeah, it would be really nice if they were all the same. I don't really care, you know, which way round it is, you know, it doesn't really matter, but, you know, yeah, it would be nice if there was just 1. Everyone had the same. Look, let's mix the local colour of this lemon exactly, right? This, by the way, is a really, really good exercise to do if you really want to learn about colour mixing. Not just with a lemon, I mean with anything. You can do it with anything. I could do it with my makeup sponge, or this makeup sponge, or the funny little plastic egg cup thing that the makeup sponge came in. You know, you can do it with anything, but I'm actually going to try and mix the colour of this lemon as exactly as I can. So I want to drop the chroma a little bit. I'm going to add some raw umber. I want it to be slightly darker and I want it to be slightly lower in chroma. Raw umber is roughly in the same colour family because it's, I'm going to need way more yellow than that. I've been really stingy, haven't I? It's a yellow-orange raw umber. At least the Michael Harding one that I've got is. Some of them are very greenish. Get some yellow. with a bit of raw umber on it, in it. So that the reason I've chosen raw umber is because it's much lower chroma than the yellow. So I'm kind of doing two jobs at once. I'm dropping the value. I'm getting paint all over my hands. I'm dropping the value and I am dropping the chroma, the intensity at the same time. See if this is any closer. Yeah, it is. It is. It's closer. So I'm squinting down and looking at it. I think I might have lost a little bit too much chroma. And also it's a little bit more greenish. So let's add a tiny bit of transparent red oxide, which will add a little bit of chroma and it will pull it more towards orange. You know, this is just a great exercise to do. You could do this every day with a different object for a month. And what it would teach you about your paints and how to mix colour accurately, you know, would really help you. That's a bit closer, squinting down. We need a little bit more chroma. I'm going to bring some more yellow back in. Overdid it with the raw umber, so I'm having to correct back now. Squinting down. You need to kind of, this is easier to do in daylight, but you know, trying to find a bit of the lemon where there's no reflection on the light with the cameras and two lights is slightly tricky, but hopefully you can see like that's pretty close. Pretty close. So I'll drop the chroma a little bit. And funny enough, sent it a little bit more orange, so I'm probably not going to need that. Some lemons tend to go, I think it depends how fresh they are. When they're fresh, they're more green. So that's pretty much the local colour of the lemon. Let's mix a bit more of that because it's probably going to want a bit more. A little bit of raw umber, a little bit of transparent red oxide. So now I know what the local colour is. I'm going to need to go a little bit lighter than that when we go into the lightest part of the lemon. And this is where it gets tricky. I'll show you why when we get to painting that bit. Okay. So you can do this with your own lemon. Obviously you can't be putting paint on this lemon because you can't get a palette knife down the internet. So I would encourage you to get a lemon and try this little exercise. It's really good. Okay, so the shadow side, let's talk a little bit about, we had a look at what the colour actually was, right? It's a slightly more orange yellow. The value is about a 3. Oh, look at this, a value scale. Now this is the Munsell value scale. So this correlates to the values in those little colour swatches in the ChromaMagic app. And I want that value there. I want this to be a value 3. I don't want my dog's hair on there, but I do want that value. Okay, makes sense? So this is how we translate it from the app to the real world. So if I just take, a good way to find out what hue a paint actually is to take a little bit of it and add some white. So if I add increasing amounts of white to this, just white, because it makes it easier to see what the colour really is, you'll see it's a red-orange. Now that's a lot more, you know, you might be surprised once you put the white in how much easier it is to see the hue, to see the colour of that. It's a red-orange. It becomes like pinkish by the time we get up here. It's too red, right? This one, this is the green gold. Add a bit of white to that. It's a very yellow green. In fact, once you get lighter, it kind of, even adding white to it, it looks more yellow than green, right? And that's why I've got these two out, because I want all the chroma of this one, and I know I want to be close to orange, but this is too red. I want it to be more of a yellow orange. Well, how I get there is by mixing from one to the other. And you can do this right up the value range if you want to. Even down the bottom. And you end up with something in between the two in terms of hue, but the chroma is still high. That's the key. The chroma is still high. So that's a little bit too much, right? That's too orange still. So I add more of the green gold. Now, this is also where you learn about the tinting strength of your paints, because the tinting strength of the transparent red oxide is way higher than the tinting strength of the green gold. So I need to add more green gold to get to about the color that I want. Ooh, let's see what value we've got there. Well, that's about a value 3. So that's about the color we want for the shadow. And I'm not bothered about it being perfect. I'm not bothered about, you can. I mean, you know, you can get a big Munsell book and you can make it perfectly right. I mean, you can get really close to the colors of a photograph using that app and a Munsell color book if you want to. Personally, I think you can learn a huge amount from doing it that way, but you can also disappear down a rabbit hole if you're not careful. And you can forget that the most important thing about color is the relationships on the panel itself. I'm going to add a bit more white. Now, if I wanted to keep, if I add white to this, watch this. Let's clean this out a little bit. So this is pretty much just these two. It's got a tiny bit of white in it, but not much. I'm going to split that into two so you can see two different things that I can do with it. If I lighten it with white up to the value that I want, which is like about a value 3, about there, I get this, which is pretty good. You know, I mean, that's got pretty good chroma. If I tried to do this with raw umber or with burnt umber, I would struggle. Why? Because they are lower chroma pigments. I couldn't get the chroma. However, what if I add yellow instead? It's still going to bring the value up, but it's going to give me a little bit more chroma because yellow is itself already a high chroma color. Went a little bit too far. So this one on the left has just a tad more chroma than the one on the right. It's not a huge amount, a little bit too light. Added too much yellow. So put in a bit of green gold, a bit more of the orange, transparent red oxide. We want a value 3, remember. So those are the 3 colors that I would use to get myself into a good area, a good color area for the shadow. That might be a little bit too orange, but we'll see. So I'm going to put this down here. I'll keep that because it might be useful. Because this is high value, this is low value. I always do this, actually almost always do this, lay out my colors and my palette in the mixes as I'm making them in terms of the value that they are. Does that all make sense so far? This is why you need to know the hue of your tube paints, because it's difficult to know how they're going to act in mixes if you don't know the hue. So I've got a light and I've got a shadow color. So I've translated what we saw in the app into a color on my palette that I know is the right value. I know the hue is about right, and I know the chroma is about right. It would surprise you for that to go onto a palette, onto a panel though, onto the painting. It will look very, very low in value, but then you get used to it. Diana says, popped in a bit late, can you tell me the colors you've got? Yeah, not too much today. We've got white, this is lead white. You can use titanium just as easily. Cad yellow, this is Michael Harding Cad yellow. It's a proper Cad yellow, not the Winsor & Newton one, which is basically some version of orange. But Cad yellow light you would use if you were using Winsor & Newton paints. Cad yellow lemon, transparent red oxide, green gold, which I've run out of, so I'll put a bit more out now, just in case I need it. What we're done with it. I'll find it later if I need it. Thrown it in the corner of the studio. Transparent red oxide, raw umber, and black. These are mostly there for the background areas, you know, if we're going to need that. That all make sense? Cohen says it's the starting 7 lineup. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It is, isn't it? It is. The thing about these colours is they give you a really good range in the yellows and oranges at all values. Sugar Muffin says, I suppose this exercise could be applied to any fresh produce. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, do it with apples. You know, it gets really interesting when you're doing it with something which has more than one colour on it, like this. Yes, workshop attendees, we're going to be painting this apple. We're going to be attacking this apple with steel wool. Well, not the apple. Don't worry, little apple. Our paintings. We're going to be doing apples. That's fun to do because you've got two really high chroma colours. You know, a pair. Really beautiful, subtle colour. You know, lower value. You've got an orange there and you've got a green, but they're much lower chroma. You know, that's why you need to understand the intensity of the colour. You know, it could be matching the local on any of those. And, you know, they're all really good to use for it. Robin, did you ask me a question that I missed? Like Yellow Lake, I think it's called. There's another one too you can use. I think you said, yeah, cadmium yellow lemon. I mean, basically, you just need an orange yellow and a green yellow, you know. The difference between cadmium yellow lemon and bright yellow lake is that cadmium yellow lemon, it's a cadmium, so it's opaque. And it's not quite as high chroma as the arrowlide yellows, which are transparent. So they don't cover as well, but they're really good in mixes. Ellen says, I wouldn't have thought of putting the paint right on the lemon. I know, right? It's a brilliant way to learn about colour mixing and then, you know, translate from there into light and shadow. Works really, really well. Yeah, Kate, that is a bit of a spoiler for the workshop there. But no, I'm not getting the steel wool and the sandpaper out today. This is a single session painting. It's just a demo. So I'm just going to be doing... an Alla Prima painting. So here's a good question. Jerry says, can you explain why you prefer this method of lowering the chroma versus using the complement of this yellow, as in purple? Yes, I can. I've done that quite a few times in streams where I've actually done it on the palette, and it takes a little while to demonstrate it. But basically, and I want to get on with doing some painting now, another stream maybe I will. But it's basically because you get much more, firstly, you get much more unpredictable results when you do it that way. It tends to change the hue an awful lot, as well as lowering the chroma. It does lower the chroma, but it doesn't do it in a very predictable way. So you can, depending on what kind of purple you use or what kind of purple you mix or magenta you mix, you can end up with some pretty wild results in terms of your hue. And it can end up looking really, really weird. That might be an effect that you want, you know, to make a more vibrant painting. And it might look nice, but that's not the same thing as it being the actual colour that the lemon is. So I think it's a good idea to learn the actual colours that things are. And then if you want to play with them, it's up to you. Tea. I've got a chocolate biscuit as well, but I think that would be a bit too noisy to eat right now, so I won't do that. Oh, the workshop is it's called Aesthetic Excursions, and we'll be learning, or I will be taking people through basically almost the opposite of what I'm showing today. So doing stuff like this, taking a reference photo and then moving deliberately beyond it, adding texture and life and all that good stuff. But I will attempt not to get distracted. I need to rough out where this lemon is going to go, right? Let's rough it out. Let's do a little bit of quick drawing out just to make sure we know where we are. Raw umber, white. Shall I oil out the panel first? No, I'll just paint today. We'll just whack the paint on and we'll see what happens. Because what I'm hoping to show you is that by building up a kind of a jigsaw of the main light and shadow areas in this painting, in this subject, I'll be able to create a feeling of form, you know. How long will it take me to do it? Probably an hour or so, because we'll be chatting and all of that stuff all the time. So might take a little while. Robin says it's all right to eat my biscuit. I don't feel I should, because the problem is this video is going to be saved on YouTube and people will see it at some point in the future, and who knows, someone may be offended by my biscuit munching. It might even go against Google's terms and conditions and they might take my video down. Can you imagine? I think it's there, like paragraph 7, addendum B, biscuit munching. No biscuits should be munched during the making of a video. They have some funny terms and conditions about live videos, though. You're not allowed to put any recorded segments in it, or they're not allowed to be too long or something like that. So I'm just dividing this up. So I've got because the photo has a really simple grid on it. So I'm just going to basically rough out where the lemon goes, just so we've got an idea of where everything is going to be. Crosses about there, up to about there, here, and then the furthest right part of the lemon is down here. Halfway back we're here. We can start building the lemon. Just looking at the angles. One of the things I love about lemons, and I'm convinced it's the reason so many artists paint them, is because, when you're doing a straight line block in, a lemon is already, it's already kind of formed itself into straight lines. It's made itself into a straight line blocking before you even come to paint it, which is very considerate of it. All lemons do it for you. They're like, they have these little straight line areas here and there that you can use to kind of rough out the shape. There must have been a lemon convention at some point where they decided, look, loads of painters are going to spend lots of time looking at us really closely. Why don't we help them out? Sorry, I'm losing it. I might be a bit overtired today, to be fair. It's been a busy old week. Little nub on the back of the lemon. Okay, so we'll have a rough division of, like, foreground, ground and background. Someone's over there somewhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide this into 3. The light area, the shadow area, and the bit in between that we call the half tone. So I'm going to call the shadow area all of this. Everything to the left of this line. I'm going to say shadow. It's not easy, by the way, especially when you're kind of starting out, to decide what's in shadow and what's in light. The best advice I can give you is to squint down and try and reduce it as much as possible. So I'm saying this is shadow and this is light. This is all going to be half tone. So, like I was saying, I deliberately photographed this lemon, so a large part of it is in shadow. This is all going to be the half tone there. We've got another shadow area here. And this is obviously all shadow at the back there. Cool. And then we've got a cast shadow, which the shape of which is affected somewhat by the cloth. It goes back here. Something else worth pointing out about this, this is all cast shadow. Worth pointing out about the way I've photographed this is that I've done it so that against the shadow area of the lemon is a lighter part of background here. And then against the very light part of the lemon, the background is slightly darker. Just helps to show the form, right? It's just useful. Kate has correctly identified the biscuit. Mark says, I've just joined. Can you start from the beginning? Yeah, sure. I'm sure no one will mind. No one will mind at all. I'll get a fresh palette. I'll clean the palette off. I'll get a fresh panel, and we'll start all over again. No problem. Everyone's all right with that, aren't they? I didn't know that those biscuits were named after a mathematician, though. That's very cool. Could you let the biscuit melt in your mouth so that no crunch will be heard? Well, the thing is, I'm going to be, it's difficult because I'm going to be talking the whole time. So I'll be like, and no one will know what I'm on about. I'm going to put a couple of colours. I'm going to throw my palette around, and then I'm going to, my palette knife, I'm going to put a couple of colours around the background, just so that when these colours go down, because we've got them here, I haven't done the halftone yet, but we've got the light and the shadow on the palette. When they go down, you've got something to kind of gauge them against. So let's mix up a quick one for the background. What did I say that was? It was like a value 6. I'm going to use like close to a neutral for that. I'm not bothered about the hue or anything as long as the chroma is low. So this is just white. I'm putting in raw umber and ivory black to my white, a little bit more raw umber. So it's a slightly, you could call it a warm neutral. I'm going to check it on the value scale. Don't have enough white in it yet. This is natural pigment stack process lead white. It is so nice, and I've almost run out. The thing is, though, we mustn't worry about running out of paint. Still, you know, it's just a really good general idea to make sure that you mix a little bit more paint than you think you're going to need, because you don't want to have to be mixing any more whilst on the fly, whilst you're going, you know, because it's a pain in the neck if you're trying to mix the same colour or something very close to it again. Nice big fat brush. This is a Cornelison's Hog, size 8. Okay. I'm going to put a little bit of solvent with it. Well, I would if I had any. I'm going to put a bit of solvent out. Just to help it go on and just cover the back. This is a sketch, basically. So now for solvent, I use terps. Obviously, Gamsol OMS is fine. God, they put such cheap lids on these things, so you can't get the lid on properly. Little bit of terps. It's just to help it go on. It will also dry quickly. Where is it going to go? Around here? I think all of the background is pretty much the same, isn't it? So let's just whack the background in. Around here. It varies a little bit underneath that, goes a little bit cooler, slightly higher value. I'm going to have to waste some more of my white. A bit more white. It's all right, it doesn't matter, because I've also got this large pot. That's heavy, actually. This is Old Holland lead white, but it's Kremnitz, which is basically lead white. So I'll be changing to that one next, once this one's all gone. So all I'm doing is just putting, I'm just roughing in like the colours that are around the lemon, so that, oh, that needed to be whiter than that. When the lemon goes in, let's just wipe it back a bit. When those colours go in, we can actually see what they look like. And, you know, to be fair, I'm not one of those painters who's very careful and is obsessive the right word? Probably not, but, you know, really, really careful about the first colours that go down and the brush strokes. I like really brushy paintings. I like to have a lot of life in them, you know, right from the get-go. Brush marks. Texture gives the painting life. Cast shadow, value of that is going to be lower, like I'm going to use raw umber with the white up to about value 4-ish. Probably be about right. And I like the way, like, as soon as you put in the cast shadow and you handle the edges a little bit of it as well, They get softer the further away they go from something. Immediately you start to get a sense of there must be some form there. There must be something there to have made that shadow there. So the cast shadows are darker, closer to the object that cast them. And then also the edges get softer as they move further away. Just rough that in, just enough basically to be able to see like when the colours of the lemon go down, something for them to work against. May as well fill it up. Okay. Lemon colours. I'm going to use hogs for the lemon as well. Slightly smaller, but not a huge amount. What are these? These are also Cornelis and Filberts. These are a size 4 and a 5. So the lightest part of the lemon, usually what happens is like, this is the local colour, isn't it, that we mixed. So it won't hit that, and this will be like the lightest part of the lemon here. So it will probably hit that local colour like somewhere around here-ish, like just as it's coming out of the kind of the half tone into the rest of the lemon, you tend to hit that local colour, you know. And then it will be slightly lighter around this bit. It's like what you could call, what they often call the light. So I'll get a little bit of, let's do this with the palette knife and do it properly. I've actually just got some raw umber in my white, which is really bad because now I've got to put some more out. I've not been careful enough with my palette today because I want this clean. I want the highest chroma that I can get. I want to raise the value a little bit, so I'll get a little bit of white. It will drop a little bit of chroma, it's unavoidable. But the local colour, remember, was already slightly lower intensity, lower chroma than this yellow. So I can afford to lose a little bit. I want this to be slightly higher chroma and slightly higher value than the local colour, which it is. This is going to be like my light, which is the lightest part of the lemon, you know, because obviously there's a little bit of extra light falling on it there, so we'll pop that in there. We're just going to sketch it in for now. Like that. Shadow colour. I haven't mixed nearly enough of that. I'm going to wax some more of that together really quick. So now I do need my green gold. There's no way that's enough. It says, I was wondering if you would use ChromaMagic for painting from life without the photographs. And the biscuit might prove to future humans that you are real life and not a robot. Yeah, I'm not AI. Honest. Look, 5 fingers on each hand. What was I doing? Oh, mixing some more shadow colour. Can you use it from life? Can you use the ChromaMagic app from life? Not really. I mean, maybe you could figure out a way, but not really. I mean, it's most useful with photographs. So you always need to bear in mind that, well, 2 things really. I mean, one of the criticisms of using apps like this, well, I actually don't think there is another app that's anywhere near as good as this, but with using techniques where you colour sample photographs, say, one of the criticisms people sometimes make, and it's a fair one, is that, well, 2 criticisms. One is that photographs change the colour of the actual object, and to an extent they do, because they do affect the value. So you need to be, you can minimise it by being very careful with how you take your photos. But yes, that is can be a concern. But it's still very useful as a learning tool to figure out how colour behaves in light. The second criticism I've heard, voiced often, is that painting is not just about perfectly matching a photograph. And I think that's a complete and utter misunderstanding of what I'm trying to show you here. This is an exercise. We're learning something about colour. This is not a finished painting, okay, and it won't be. When I'm doing an actual painting, I tend to be an awful lot more interpretive about it. Let's get the shadow colour in next. So this, you saw me mix this, right? It's more orange. I'm just putting these in as kind of undifferentiated blocks at the moment that we will then refine a little bit once we get, you know, a little bit further through. Nub in the back. So when it first goes down, it all looks a little bit too flat, and it kind of looks like it's all the same, and in fact we need to be varying it quite a bit. I'm not going to go into the half tone though. So the half tone, I want to be somewhere in between the two, closer to the light. So we'll say, did I check? I can't remember what I said it was. It was probably going to be like about a value, probably a 6-ish. A little bit lighter than that. There's a nice, really big area of halftone here. And it really helps you, you know, when you're thinking about what color to paint things. You know, another thing that you could worry about with an app like that is that you can go down a rabbit hole, like trying to sample every little area of color and see what it is. That's why it really helps if you learn something about painting light and shadow first. You know, about how about controlling form, you know, painting form. So the basic kind of the main color areas of light, shadow, and halftone, it is really, really useful if you learn about those, because then you can look at a photograph and you can decide which areas you want to check for the color based on those main color areas. Right. There's also the reflected light, which is a little bit lighter than the shadow, but not too light, and that will go down here. So I've just gone a little bit lighter there. And it's starting to appear, you know, it's really undefined at the moment, but now we can begin to modulate a little bit between these where we feel it needs it. And you see the form starting to come. The nub. We need a nub. I mean, this is just, you know, I'm not even keeping that closely to the shape or anything, but you can see how the colors are pretty good, right? And then we start to refine them in a little bit. This is turning away from us, this form, so I would go down a little bit in value as we go. As the form turns away from us, just a tiny bit helps the form to turn. I want that light bit of background down here behind the knob, so that shows where the back of the lemon is, and it also shows us the top of the cast shadow. You see how it's starting to come? It's going from being basically almost like I can think of this as like almost like a jigsaw puzzle, almost like we're building it like a jigsaw puzzle. A couple of little things that people often include in the modeling factors. I mean, that's a very simplified version, but it's pretty much there, right? Just modulate that halftone back into the shadow. The occlusion shadow. I'll use a hog for that as well, actually. Slightly smaller one. The occlusion shadow is this area here, and it really helps objects to sit on a surface. it is the area of lowest value where there's no, I'm using black and a little bit of transparent red oxide to give it some chroma. They call it occlusion because the light is that no light can get in there, it's occluded. Even if I just put it in as a dark mark, immediately the lemon starts to sit, doesn't it? You can see it suddenly starts to sit on the surface. Obviously, this is like really simplified. Then it comes back into the cast shadow. It really, really helps you to learn about these basic modeling factors and nail them first. So a lot of you will have seen that quince painting that I was working on interminably for quite a long. I think I did 5 sessions on it at the end, and maybe only 4. 2 of them were live. But all the time when I'm painting something like that, I'm also thinking about the modeling factors. All of that texture and everything that I put on that painting wouldn't have worked if I hadn't been careful about making sure that I created a good form, believable form. So that's the occlusion shadow in. I'm going to soften that between the occlusion shadow and the shadow part of the lemon. I'm going to soften that a little bit just by dragging through it. I'm going to modulate between the halftone and the light a little more here, so that is a little smoother. Just basically, just a little bit of blending. See, it doesn't take much if you can go in with the right colours. It doesn't take very much to start creating an impression of the form. I've gone too light here, so I'm just going to adjust a little bit between these areas. This should be a bit darker here, so I'm just thinking, is that bit light enough? Is it too dark? Is it too light? So the last modeling factor that I was talking about and didn't get to putting in is the highlight, which is a bit of direct light pointing straight at us on the side of the lemon there. I'm going to use mostly white for that. It's about here. White. Doesn't look quite like that because obviously a lemon's surface is kind of dotty, speckled, pimpled. So I'll pimple the light a little bit. Do a little bit of, get a soft brush out, do a little bit of blending here. Just soften a couple of areas where we're going from from one area of the form to another. More occlusion shadow helps it sit. Shall I put the little knob in on the end? Let's put the little knob in. We get a couple of little synthetics out. I think we're pretty much there, to be honest. So from here, now you can see, like, this is drastically simplified form, okay? So if you were putting something together like this could be like your first kind of go in, your first block in, and then from here, you can start to refine it. Like where do I need to change the values? Where should it be slightly lighter? Where should it be slightly darker? Where do I need to be a little bit more careful about the blending? Where are the edges too hard? This is basically just form painting. I think I probably want a little bit more reflected light back here, which goes in the shadow there. So this is, as an exercise, this is a really, really good exercise to do. Okay, so the actual painting of that was probably about half an hour, maybe a little bit less. If you can create good form with very simple means like this, then you will have no problem creating it in your paintings, and you can focus on other things that you might want to think about more, you know. How you want to make the painting your own. What, you know, do you want to make it more expressive? Do you want it to be really highly finished? If you want it to be really highly finished, well, you've got the basics there. You know, the color is already pretty good. So all I'm doing now is I'm just refining some little bits here and there to hopefully show you that all of those, I'm not adding any more paint really, that all of those colors were right. You know, there's nothing that I'm putting on here that I didn't already have mixed. You know, just going between those colors. So, you know, it might have looked like that color was a little bit too intense. It was a little bit too dark. It was a little bit too this, it was too that, but it was actually right. It was the right color. But in order to mix it, I did need to understand what hue my paints were. So this is really, really brushy. There's very, very little has been really resolved and finished, but it's not detail that makes form. It's understanding light and shadow and simplifying. You know, this is quite drastically simplified. Makes a huge difference. You can do that. At the moment, if anything, the division between the light and the shadow of this lemon is stronger than it is in the photo, which is great, right? Because, you know, you want the painting to be, if you can make a painting that's stronger than the photo, then happy days, you know. I'm tempted to actually bring down the value of the background a little bit more so I can play a little bit now, because I'm at the point where it's fun. You know, let's make this stand out a little bit more by bringing down the value just a touch of the background around the light side, and that gives it a little bit more punch and a little bit more presence. You know, you can see it a little bit better now. I like this being lighter here because it makes this bit stand out. If you had a big still life painting, you might not need to finish at one element of it any more than that, you know. Let me try and catch up on them in the comments. What shape was that brush? It was, they're all filberts that I've used, with the exception of the little rounds that I used for the little nub thing, and my softening brushes. Could do with a little bit more. See, I'm getting into fiddling mode now. Just curving down into the shadow. But that's got form now, though, hasn't it? You know. But hopefully, this has helped to show like how little you can get away with as long as it's right. You know, if you spend loads of time fussing on something like this, trying to figure out what's wrong, is that right? I can't tell what it is. How am I going to, you know, figure out what I need to change? Then, you know, you tend to lose the freshness of the paint. The beauty of painting like this is that it has an awful lot of freshness and life. That it's kind of difficult to keep, but there's other things that you can get, you know, from working on things more. Yeah, they're all filberts. That's that, Sandra, yes. That's what I do have trouble opening bottles. This is true. Michelle says, you could take a photo from your live subject and use that, but be aware that the colors will not be exactly what you see. It will be more of a guide, yeah. I find the main thing about photos is that they tend to, you've got to be really careful with the values. Once you've got, set your white balance, that's like the key. That's the most important thing, is learn to set white balance. Once you've got that, you're most of the way there. But what tends to happen in photos is they tend to stress, they tend to exaggerate, is probably the best word, the value differences, like the values between the light and the shadows. How do you deal with that? I take my photos into Lightroom and I up the exposure a little bit. whilst making sure that this doesn't get blown out, and then the shadows get slightly lighter. So this photo has been slightly processed. Most of my photos are. I just not very much, but I usually bring up the exposure a little bit in Adobe Lightroom to try to compensate for that problem that you can sometimes get where the shadows come out a little bit too dark, you know, a little bit too extreme in photos. Jerry says, would you explain for the millionth time probably the difference between halftone and local color? I get so confused. Yeah. So the local color, this is the local color. It's the color the thing is. If you get some paint and you put it on the object itself, it's the actual color, independent of light and shadow. Whether it's in shadow or whether it's in light makes no difference. What happens then, hang on a minute. Right, so this is the local color here of the lemon. It's just the color that it is. That's the color that I mixed, right? If I knock one of these lights off, then one side of the lemon will go into shadow. So as I'm moving, this part of the lemon, right, is local color. As I'm moving it around, now it's in the halftone. Now it's in the shadow. Back into the halftone. Now it's out into the light. So the local color changes depending on the lighting situation, okay? On how much light is falling on that particular part of the object. That's the best way to think about local color. If you mix a color and you put it on whatever it happens to be, and you get that color right, that is the local color of that object. Then it gets affected by the light. So it gets lighter in the light, but not much. Slightly darker as it's going through into the halftone, but the halftone still belongs to the light. So for instance, with this lemon, in terms of the values, right? The light values are around here, 8, 8.5. That's the light, 8.5, 8.5. The halftone is about 7, 6, between a 7 and a 6. Still in the light. The shadow is all the way around here in the 3, right? The shadow is way, way darker. So light, halftone, shadow. There's a bigger gap between the halftone and the shadow. Generally speaking, an indoor light, still life like this, than there is between the light and the halftone, because the halftone belongs to the light. But hopefully that explains what a local color is. The halftone is like just when the form is just starting to turn away from the light. So it's a little bit darker, but you're not in shadow yet. There is still light there. It's also, incidentally, usually at the area of most texture, if something is a textured surface like this. So if I was going to be painting like a really realistic version and building in the texture, I would be building a lot of the dimples in the halftone area, because it's like raking light on a garden, you know, where you see the long shadows from trees. It's kind of like that. Okay. Have a go. Don't forget, for anyone who's in the school, you can have this reference, the actual reference photo, and you can do this. You could probably make a pretty good fist of it just watching the YouTube stream, though. You know, hopefully it will give you a pretty good idea. But if you've got the ChromaMagic app, quick plug for ChromaMagic. This is how I use it. As I use it mostly as a teaching tool, but it's a really, really useful learning tool, because you can take your own photos and then you can stick them into ChromaMagic and you can learn a huge amount. Like, I guarantee you, most people would paint that too light, the shadow area. And they would also lose too much chroma. They would lose too much intensity. And then you're like, why don't my shadow colors look right with my yellows? Usually they're the wrong value and they don't have enough chroma. If you used a raw umber or a burnt umber to mix that, it would not be dark enough. Okay. All right. I hope you enjoyed the session today. I hope it was fun. I'm quite partial to my little lemon painting. Maybe we'll do some more. Actually, I'd be quite into the idea of doing quite a few of these little color deep dives on objects. Maybe next time we'll do one on something with more than one color on it. I mean, this is basically, this is the heart of my Keys to Color course, is this. Modeling form. It's not just about, you know, getting the color right from a photo. It's about learning how to model form. If you don't understand the difference between the local colour, the light, the halftone and the shadow, you will struggle to paint that. It's not just matching colours from a photo, it's also understanding how to create form with paint. Okay. Kate says, will you take out the tiny speck of white on the edge? I can see your face. Oh, where is it? Where's the face? Is it like... Is it there? So, is the problem that there's an eye there, and if I put little pupils in them, it would become a little lemon animal? Is that the... Okay. I hope you enjoyed the stream today, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. I think I'm going to do a few more of these little coloured downs because they're great fun and I think people get a lot out of them. I'm going to go and have my dinner now. Cook a pizza for the boys. I hope you all have a lovely Friday. Have a lovely weekend. And if I don't see you before, anyone who's on the workshop, obviously I'll see you on Monday. Details for the first session will be going out tomorrow. I'll see you next week. Bye for now.